It did not start with sirens or a dramatic speech. It started with silence, the kind that feels engineered. For weeks, there were quiet signals, unusual military movement in the Gulf, back-channel calls between Washington and Jerusalem, intelligence activity that never quite reached the headlines. Then, in a single night, the sky over Tehran changed. If you understand how quickly power can shift, stay with me, because what happened in those first hours may redefine the region. Around 9:30 a.m. Tehran time, coordinated explosions struck key targets in the capital. President Trump announced what he called Operation Epic Fury as Israeli strike platforms completed their first wave. Missiles hit near the presidential compound and inside the Supreme Leader's complex. According to Israeli security officials, this was a calculated decapitation strike, months in preparation. Senior regime figures were reportedly gathered inside an above-ground structure at the moment of impact, including the man long viewed as the Supreme Leader's likely successor. If true, that detail changes everything. In authoritarian systems, succession is survival. Remove both the leader and the heir at once, and the chain of command fractures instantly. Reports suggest more than 40 senior officials were killed in the opening wave. Commanders tied to missile forces, intelligence, nuclear oversight, air defense, internal security, decades of institutional control erased in minutes. Israeli sources have described it as one of the largest regime decapitation operations in modern warfare. And the precision raises a deeper question. Strikes like this require inside knowledge, timing, confirmation, exact positioning. Was this purely external force, or the final move in an internal fracture already underway? As Tehran absorbed the Udar, Israel and U.S. assets faced immediate retaliation. Ballistic missiles were launched toward Israeli territory and American facilities across the region. U.S. forces intercepted incoming projectiles while conducting their own offensive strikes from air and sea. Hundreds of strike events were recorded within hours, including cruise missiles, long-range platforms, and expanded use of one-way attack drones capable of deep penetration. This was not symbolic fire. It was layered technological escalation. Iranian state media denied the death of the Supreme Leader, despite claims from U.S. and Israeli officials that confirmation had been obtained. Historically, Tehran delays official acknowledgement of leadership losses. But images emerging from parts of the capital showed something unexpected. Crowds gathering, some celebrating, fireworks in certain districts. For decades, dissent was crushed. The psychological shock of sudden removal at the top cannot be overstated. President Trump framed the strike as justice and warned that operations would continue as long as necessary, repeating that Iran would never obtain a nuclear weapon. He issued a direct message to members of the IRGC: lay down your weapons and receive immunity or face destruction. That calculation now looks very different for those inside the system. When dozens of senior leaders disappear in a single coordinated strike, loyalty stops being ideology and starts becoming survival. Let's talk about scale. In previous operations, including last year's strikes on nuclear facilities under Operation Midnight Hammer, the United States focused on specific hardened sites. This time, the scope is broader. High-value IRGC facilities, naval bases, missile production infrastructure, intelligence hubs, and logistical networks have all reportedly been targeted. Interestingly, the 3 major nuclear sites struck last year have not yet been hit again, suggesting that either their capabilities were sufficiently degraded or that future phases may address them separately. That leaves open a chilling possibility. What we have witnessed so far could be phase 1. Throughout his address, President Trump referenced decades of hostility between the Iranian regime and the United States, from the embassy hostage crisis to proxy attacks in Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, and beyond. He framed Operation Epic Fury as both defensive and preemptive, designed to eliminate imminent threats and permanently dismantle Iran's ability to project missile power or develop nuclear weapons. Whether one agrees with that framing or not, the operational reality is undeniable. The military campaign is ongoing. This was not a single night of shock and awe followed by silence. This is sustained pressure. Now pause for a moment and consider the geopolitical implications. If the regime's top leadership has truly been eliminated, who steps into the vacuum? Is there a second tier prepared to consolidate control? Or do rival factions within the IRGC and political apparatus begin maneuvering for dominance? What role do regional actors play? How does Russia respond? What about China, which has deep economic ties with Tehran? Does this escalate into a broader confrontation, or does it accelerate internal fragmentation inside Iran? These are not abstract academic questions. They determine whether the region stabilizes or ignites. And here is another layer that cannot be ignored. Reports indicate that some IRGC and security personnel are already signaling reluctance to fight. If that is accurate, it suggests morale fractures at a moment of extreme vulnerability. Authoritarian systems often appear monolithic until the instant they are not. When the head is removed and the inner circle decimated, the illusion of permanence shatters. The next 48 hours could determine whether this becomes a swift transition or a prolonged power struggle. If you have made it this far, you already understand that this is not just another headline. This is potentially one of the most consequential military operations in modern Middle Eastern history. If you want clear, detailed breakdowns without noise, make sure you subscribe and hit the like button, because independent analysis matters more than ever in moments like this. Back on the ground, life in Tehran is suspended between fear and anticipation. State broadcasters continue their denials. Official statements are cautious, controlled, measured. Yet social media clips show a city processing shock in real time. Some remain indoors, wary of further strikes. Others gather in small clusters, testing the boundaries of what is now possible. There are reports of internet disruptions in certain districts. Communications have become inconsistent. In regimes built on narrative control, information is power. And tonight, information is contested. Meanwhile, American forces remain on high alert across the region. Naval groups in the Gulf have adjusted posture. Air defense systems remain activated. Regional allies are recalibrating security protocols. The message from Washington is clear. This is not symbolic retaliation. It is strategic dismantling. But dismantling what comes next is the unknown. Is this the collapse of a 46-year-old Islamic regime, or the beginning of a chaotic transition that could prove even more volatile? One more critical detail deserves attention. The use of large-scale one-way attack drones marks a doctrinal shift. These systems remove pilot risk, allow saturation attacks, and complicate defensive calculations. Iran, which has itself relied heavily on drone warfare through proxies, is now facing the same concept deployed at a far more advanced level. Warfare is evolving, and this operation may be remembered as a turning point in how major powers conduct sustained strike campaigns. President Trump closed his address by speaking directly to the Iranian people, calling this their moment to take control of their destiny. He urged them to remain sheltered during ongoing strikes and promised overwhelming American backing if they chose to seize the opportunity. That rhetoric places enormous weight on civilian action. But revolutions are unpredictable. They require organization, coordination, leadership. With the top tier eliminated, will a unifying figure emerge, or will fragmented opposition struggle to coalesce? As bombs continue to fall and statements continue to emerge, the world is watching a power structure either implode or transform in real time. This is not the end of the story. It may not even be the middle. It could be the opening chapter of a geopolitical reordering that reshapes alliances, energy markets, regional balances, and global security doctrines for decades. If you value deep dives like this and want to follow every development as it unfolds, subscribe and like the video so you do not miss the next update. What happens next will determine whether Operation Epic Fury is remembered as the decisive blow that ended an era or the spark that ignited something far larger. And that next chapter is already being written tonight. But here is where the story becomes even more complicated and possibly even more dangerous. Removing a leader is one thing. Removing the structure that allowed him to rule for nearly half a century is something else entirely. The Islamic Republic was never built around one man alone. It was built around networks, clerical councils, the Revolutionary Guard's economic empire, intelligence branches embedded in universities, industries, ports, and oil infrastructure. When the head is cut off, those networks do not instantly vanish. They go silent. They regroup. They calculate. And right now, somewhere behind closed doors, men who survived the first wave are deciding whether to fight for a collapsing system or pivot towards survival under a new reality. Reports circulating among diplomatic circles suggest emergency meetings are taking place in Qom and Mashhad. Not public gatherings, not televised councils, but quiet conversations about continuity of power. The Assembly of Experts, the body constitutionally tasked with selecting a supreme leader, now faces a scenario it was never truly designed to manage: a simultaneous vacuum at the very top during active foreign military pressure. Do they rush to appoint a symbolic figure to project stability? Do they declare temporary collective leadership? Or do they delay, hoping to assess how much of the security apparatus remains intact? Every hour without clarity increases the risk of fragmentation. Inside the IRGC, the calculus may be even harsher. The Revolutionary Guard is not just a military force. It is an economic conglomerate, controlling construction firms, energy contracts, telecommunications infrastructure, and vast patronage networks. If senior commanders have been eliminated, mid-level officers suddenly inherit both opportunity and threat. Some may view this as their moment to consolidate authority. Others may fear being the next target if intelligence penetration runs deeper than assumed. Remember what made the opening strike so devastating: precision. That level of accuracy implies surveillance, signals interception, perhaps human sources embedded at high levels. If that is true, then paranoia inside the regime will be extreme. Who leaked the meeting? Who confirmed attendance? Who transmitted coordinates? Suspicion can destabilize authoritarian systems faster than bombs. And as mistrust spreads, operational cohesion erodes. Beyond Iran's borders, regional actors are repositioning. Gulf states are quietly increasing security around energy infrastructure. Oil markets reacted within minutes of the first confirmed strike, with volatility surging as traders tried to price in both regime collapse and possible escalation. The Strait of Hormuz remains a strategic choke point. If remaining Iranian naval elements attempt disruption, global shipping could feel immediate shockwaves. At the same time, Hezbollah, various militias in Iraq and Syria, and other proxy forces are now in an uncertain position. Their funding pipelines and command guidance historically flowed from Tehran's senior leadership. With that leadership decapitated, do these groups act independently? Do they launch retaliatory attacks to prove loyalty? Or do they freeze, waiting for new instructions that may never come? The absence of clear command can be as destabilizing as aggressive retaliation. There is also the nuclear question, which remains unresolved despite last year's strikes. Even if enrichment facilities were degraded, knowledge does not disappear. Scientists, engineers, procurement networks, foreign intermediaries, all of these components remain scattered across the country and possibly beyond it. If the regime fractures, who controls that expertise? Does it become leverage in negotiations? Does it become a bargaining chip for factions seeking protection? Or could elements attempt to accelerate clandestine work in response to humiliation? These are the kinds of strategic uncertainties that make this moment far more complex than a single night of explosions. Meanwhile, cyber operations are unfolding in parallel. Telecommunications disruptions, intermittent blackouts in certain provinces, unexplained outages in banking networks. These could be defensive countermeasures by the regime or offensive cyber activity from external actors seeking to compound chaos. Modern conflict is layered. It is kinetic, digital, psychological, economic. And Operation Epic Fury appears designed not only to destroy physical targets, but to overload the regime's capacity to respond coherently across all domains at once. That is what makes this potentially transformative rather than symbolic. And then there is the human dimension. For ordinary Iranians, uncertainty is both terrifying and intoxicating. After decades of strict control, morality policing, media censorship, and political suppression, the sudden disappearance of the central authority figure creates a psychological rupture. But revolutions do not automatically produce stability. They can unleash rival visions of the future, secular reformists, monarchist nostalgia movements, hardline remnants, regional ethnic movements seeking autonomy. Iran is not monolithic. It is diverse, layered, and historically complex. If centralized authority weakens significantly, centrifugal forces could surface. The question is whether there is enough institutional resilience to channel change into structured transition rather than uncontrolled fragmentation. Internationally, reactions remain cautious. Public statements from major powers emphasize restraint, stability, and the protection of civilians. But behind closed doors, intelligence services are racing to assess second-order effects. If this truly marks the collapse of one of the longest-serving authoritarian systems in the region, it shifts strategic calculations from Eastern Europe to East Asia. Alliances may recalibrate. Energy corridors may diversify. Defense postures may adjust. The perception of American willingness to conduct large-scale, sustained decapitation operations will be studied closely by both allies and adversaries. Deterrence is not only about weapons, it is about credibility. At the same time, escalation remains a live possibility. Even with senior leadership eliminated, Iran retains missile stockpiles, regional assets, and asymmetric capabilities. A cornered structure can be unpredictable. Will there be a dramatic retaliatory attempt to reassert relevance? Or will survival instincts override ideological commitment? The coming days will likely reveal whether remaining command structures prioritize symbolic revenge or pragmatic de-escalation. If you are following this closely and want to stay ahead of the shifting dynamics rather than reacting after the fact, this is the moment to subscribe and like the video. Independent analysis and continuous updates are essential when events are moving at this speed, and your engagement ensures these breakdowns keep reaching people who want more than headlines. Another angle that deserves attention is the generational divide within Iran. Younger populations, digitally connected despite censorship barriers, have repeatedly shown willingness to challenge authority. If segments of the security apparatus hesitate to enforce crackdowns without clear central command, space for organized civic mobilization could expand rapidly. Yet organization requires leadership, communication, and coordination, all difficult under active military operations and disrupted networks. Will diaspora communities step in with messaging? Will exiled political figures attempt to position themselves as transitional leaders? Or will internal grassroots networks shape events organically without a single face at the forefront? Economically, the impact could be immediate and severe. Currency volatility, capital flight, disruptions in trade flows, these factors compound public anxiety. A collapsing regime may struggle to maintain subsidies, pay public sector salaries, or manage food supply chains. Such stresses can either accelerate calls for structural reform or deepen desperation. And desperation can empower hardliners who promise order at any cost. Stay engaged. Watch every signal. Because what unfolds next will not only shape Iran's future, but the strategic balance of an entire region. If you believe detailed, long-form analysis matters in moments like this, subscribe and like the video so you do not miss the next development. History rarely announces itself clearly in the moment it turns. Often it looks like confusion, like noise, like contradictory reports. But beneath that noise, structures are shifting. And right now, those structures are shifting faster than anyone predicted.